All right, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Almost broke my gavel. All right, there we go. It's that kind of day. All right, hope everybody's doing well. So just as a reminder, we are continuing on with our budget study sessions. We are in the CSA for strategic support and appointees. We were having some conversation about a proposal to tie a portion of council pay to performance. I believe we had covered everything else within strategic support and appointees. I don't think we had any other questions on that. Just to give people a quick run of show, whenever we wrap up questions on this topic, we'll close out strategic support, go on to fees and charges, and then close with capital budget. And we have allocated up until noon if we need it. Okay, so let's continue. I'll pause for a moment to see if we have any hands for other questions.
I just want to note for the record, all are present.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to take roll, Tony?
We can
Did
just
you
say
want to
all
do
are
your job?
present.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just say all are present.
All
I
are
just want to
present.
say it for the record.
Okay, for the record, all are present. Okay, great. And we have a lot of city staff here. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for all the work you do. Let's jump in. Okay, Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. So this is just for my recollection, this is in regards to the pay for performance proposal. If I could just get, it's been a while since our discussion yesterday, how is this going to work in practice? So I know that we're talking about putting together a rubric or some sort of methodology to score the council, and then what? Like, am I just going to sit here while my colleagues vote to not give me a raise, or what does it look like, honestly?
No, yeah, thanks. I mean, the idea is to model what we already do for our appointees and what our appointees do for their senior staff, for deputy city managers and for department heads. We've given direction as a body in the last couple of budget messages around being crisper about goals, metrics, and pay for performance for our appointees and senior staff. There's a debate, obviously, we can have about whether or not that's appropriate to apply to us as the council. I'm proposing that we do with tying just 5% of our salary to measurable progress. The process-wise, I think the infrastructure is largely there. This is we're a city that's been very data-driven for years in the sense that we do a lot of measurement and data collection. The nice thing about the scorecards and dashboards that we've built out is that they give us a sense of prioritization. And the proposal would be to say, within whatever our priority areas are, we've called them our focus areas, but that's just a term of art for the council. That could evolve. There's nothing in stone here. But essentially within those 5 focus areas, we have outcome goals for the community that, frankly, we can't just directly change, like crime rates or levels of homelessness. So it wouldn't really be reasonable to tie anyone's pay, ours or the city managers or department heads, to that outcome goal. But one level below in all of our dashboards, we have what we call our performance measures, which are where really we as decision makers and implementers work together to prioritize the programs and policies that we think will have the biggest impact on those outcomes. We agree on how we measure the success of those programs and policies. We use the budget process to allocate resources and make trade-offs collectively. And through a majority vote of the council, we all decide, okay, these are the programs we're going to fund. Here's how we measure success. And we believe these are the best uses of resources to help deliver that outcome, move us closer to a safer city, a housed city, more affordable housing, a cleaner city, more jobs. And so the idea would be to take those performance measures and have the city manager, after the close of the fiscal year, come to us in the fall with a readout, just like a city auditor report would, and show us the math. And what the city manager has requested is an opportunity to look at best practices from other sectors and bring us a proposal for how that formula would work to keep it simple. As we mentioned, it may not be that 100% of goals met means 100% of pay. Many companies like Google, for example, who use pay for performance, if you hit 80% of your goals, it's considered, that's kind of the sweet spot, because you want to be ambitious, but, and sort of stretch, but recognizing that if you're always hitting your goals, you're probably setting them too low. So I think the city manager would bring us a report in the fall proposing how they'd be scored, but it's really those dashboards, those scorecards and dashboards that we look at every quarter and that we all use to organize our work.
Okay, and then so we're judged by the whole or by individual council members? What does that look like?
No, as a body, because
Okay.
as a body, we pass the budget citywide, we pass policies citywide. We don't do district-specific budgets or policies. This budget process is a citywide plan.
Are you going to say something, Nora?
I just wanted to point out and make sure everybody's aware that under the charter, it's all or none. So
Okay.
it applies to everybody. It's not it can't be district by district. It's across the board.
Okay.
I think individual performance is probably assessed by our voters and our,
That's where I was going
right?
to go, and I know
That's like constituent
Yeah.
services.
Councilmember Condellis and Councilmember Cohen are both already said that, so I don't, I guess, want to repeat what's already been said. My main concern about hearing it's catchy, pay for performance. I come from the nonprofit sector, and so I know that a lot of discussions about pay for performance makes sense. My concern is we are a body that is setting our own metrics, and there's been a lot of times our staff have come forward with metrics, and I've been critical of that because it's like, okay, you guys are meeting your goals 100% of the time. Well, we need to stretch those goals out or something like that. And I just feel like people can do whatever they want with data, or they could choose to value data in some equations. They could choose to value data in other equations. I'm mostly concerned is that East San Jose is a unique district. Historically, the whole of the city council hasn't always prioritized the interests of East Side San Jose. So my constituents may be saying, wow, this guy's fighting, he's advocating, he's an activist, he's doing everything he can to make sure the values of East San Jose are being presented, but to the whole, that may not be as valuable. And we could see that historically if you go through my district, right, and you see the quality of our parks, the healthcare outcomes, the job performances of our youth in the community, right? It's blatant in our face that the city hasn't always prioritized the best interests of District 5. And in many cases, we've come a long way, but in many cases, the immigrant and the Latino community. It's not, it's not speculation. The outcomes from our populations determine that, because where there are investment, where there are priority, right, where you water the grass, right, it'll grow. And so I'm concerned that this will make council members who are like me, right, it's not going to make me, because I'm still going to fight. I grew up poor. I'm not worried about 5% of my pay, but for council members who are concerned about, being seen as shaking up, the status quo. I mean, status quo has been against me my whole life. Status quo has been against the East Side the whole life. And I just feel like this could be drowning out voices who may not see the priorities of the entire city as the main priority of their district. Yeah, and that's just something I've experienced. You see that directly with the quality of our parks. You see that directly with our streets. There's growing weeds. There's 10 abandoned cars in almost every single neighborhood. And I'm concerned that if there's a hole, what about the voices of the minority, right? How are we protecting the minority from the tyranny of the majority, as so many famous elected officials have said in the past?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, totally hear you. I would argue that the single best way to avoid that is for us to highlight it, invest in the data infrastructure, the data equity work we've been doing, and actually make it explicit. I think the best hope we have at having real equity around parks, roads, after-school programs is through goal setting and measurement. And I think it would be very appropriate for this council, and you would have my support, to have a performance measure in there within a focus area that is about equitable delivery of services. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think any system of goals and metrics will be imperfect. There are always trade-offs. I think the biggest risk we face is actually not making things explicit and not being accountable for delivering measurable outcomes. And I think we're actually much more likely to continue to get inequitable outcomes in that world. But I've seen it work. I understand folks have concerns, totally valid. I think that's kind of what the dialogue's all about. We will keep going. We have heard on this topic from council members Campos and Cohen, we can come back around to you. We're still on the first round of comments, and then we'll go to 5-minute second round. Let's go to Vice Mayor Foley next.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz, for your questions on how this is going to play out. I don't see the voices of the minority, as you referred to them, having less of an impact than the voice of the majority in the review process. This is a group review that the 11 of us are setting parameters, they're setting the goals, we're all agreeing to what those are. The service delivery in different districts may be different, but that doesn't mean the total outcome, which isn't district by district, it's total, isn't going to be counted and calculated. You absolutely shouldn't be held accountable for delivery of services in your area that are not necessarily the number of services that are being delivered in other parts of the district. You shouldn't be handicapped on that. That's why the percentage that is being proposed affects all of us, and then the goal and the payback of that 5% or whatever percent it turns out to be affects us all equally. It doesn't affect you differently because of the outcome that we're achieving. So I don't see that as an issue. I'm concerned, I think in some ways it heightens the voice of the minority because it elevates what you're saying to the group of the whole and not just you individually advocating for District 5 or District 2 or any other, or District 7, any other district. I see this as us making a decision. These are the goals. The city manager is showing us the outcomes in the fall of this year. She's requested September, which makes sense. Then in next year, in the budget process, and this is how I mean, we haven't determined this, but this is how I see it playing out. Next year during the budget process, when the 5% is being withheld, we determine, okay, we've met our goals, and she is coming up with a rubric. What, if you meet 80% of the goals, you get the 5% back, or whatever she comes back with. I don't see this as hurting us. I don't see this as affecting our ethics or our values or our North Star in any way, shape, or form. I see it supporting what we do and makes us and staff work in concert to get the things we need to do, which you've mentioned many times are much more needed in your district than in my district, for instance, some of the issues. So I don't see it. I'm listening to the discussion, and when pay for performance first came, I thought, oh, the charter amendment, that concerns me. But this isn't a charter amendment. I think this is becoming more and more workable and more flexible, but also more, it keeps us accountable, which I think is important for us. For me, it's important to know I'm being held to a standard. And to be perfectly honest, this isn't going to affect me because I term out, and yeah, I mean, you're all doing the math. You may all have already made that calculation about me. I'm gone before this affects me at all. But it doesn't mean I don't have a role in the decision, and I don't make the decision based on successor council members in my seat or in other seats. So I just wanted to add that to the mix. I really look forward to city manager's analysis of it. I think the city manager coming back with the numbers and the rubric takes also the politics out of the decision too, which is important. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Okay, looks like we're on the second round of comments, so we'll try to keep these to 5 minutes, and we'll go to Councilmember Campos.
Thank you, Mayor. So because I'm a new council member, right, I'm in my first year on my first term. This is really big policy, and about a third of us are new in our first year, first term, never having held elected office. I just want to acknowledge that and take this time to better understand what it is that my staff and I can do to achieve what we want to achieve. So, Mayor, I'd love to know, you know, you've been on this council and are moving forward this policy. What is it that council members are doing or not doing that makes this change necessary?
Well, I think the opportunity in front of us that we as a council collectively have been moving toward over the last last few years, frankly precedes my time on the council, is I think we as an organization have been moving toward a much more focused and data-driven approach with a greater sense of feedback loops and accountability. There was a tremendous amount of work done around smart cities before I joined the council. I was proud to be able to chair that council committee when it existed, when I first joined. The council made a big step, in my view, a couple years ago when choosing to adopt focus areas and be more explicit about prioritization. We often, I think, in the lack of being really explicit, sort of left things unsaid and sort of, you know, I think tried to be everything to everyone, and I think being forced to do prioritization. We also, through the Smart Cities work and about 3 budgets ago, began investing, in addition to a lot of just general technology and data work, in data equity work to better understand the measurable impacts of programs and policies and how they differ by census tract. So I think we've been moving in a direction of making our goals more explicit, our measures of success more explicit, understanding at a more granular level the impact we're having. I think the hardest part of our job is having to make trade-offs. And I think that there's a real value in tying something concrete, in this case, a portion of our pay. I had suggested making it a portion of our pay raise, but as you all know, that would require a ballot measure and changing the way the salary setting commission works, and they only actually do the market analysis for our raises every 5 years. There's a lot of complexity there. So acknowledging all that complexity, the idea instead would be to just take 5% of our base salary and be able to tell our community very explicitly, we collectively are not going to simply sit in our own lanes at the level of kind of messaging and maybe our individual, ideologies or rhetoric, but that we're going to actually be accountable for a finite number of goals, a collective decision around how we measure progress, and we're going to be making decisions that where we have to validate that what we do
Mayor,
through the budget.
I understand what you're saying.
Is going to deliver an impact.
This is my time, my 5 minutes.
You can have another 5-minute round if you'd like, just so you know. I'm not going to cut you off prematurely if you want to keep going.
Well, I just want to get through to make sure that I'm hearing clearly what it is that council members are not doing that makes this change necessary.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I think the idea is that tying our...
So I can clarify my question, right? Because I'm new, I'm trying to understand, like, councils before us, they get the opportunity to discuss policy, they get the opportunity to come in with different and diverse perspectives, and that's how policy is shaped. So what I don't understand is now you're saying we need to tie a portion of our pay to work together as a collective to move things forward. As I understand, that's what council has been doing for the councils before us. Maybe it's not moving forward the particular objectives that under your leadership as mayor is what's trying to move forward, but that's what I'm trying to understand. What exactly have previous councils done that makes this change necessary? What have they not done?
Well, look, I'm not I'm not here to judge or denigrate or critique past councils. My point is that I think there's a great opportunity in continuing to push the envelope on everything I was just describing. Focus, being explicit about goals, measurement, and showing the community that we have skin in the game and that we are accountable in a very personal and very concrete way for delivering measurable outcomes. I guess what I would argue, maybe more to your question, is that I don't buy the idea that elections are the only form of accountability that is valid or the only way to push us to be more focused, more efficient, and crisper in the discussion and debate we have about our hypotheses for change. I think often rhetoric, interest group influence, name recognition, fundraising, there are a lot of feedback loops in the political system. I'd like one of those feedback loops to be that we set goals, measure, and have some actual personal accountability, as in a little bit of our pay each year is tied to whether or not we actually drive results. And that's a philosophic point. I don't know that it's a technical answer so much as you either believe that tying a bit of our pay to delivering measurable results will make us that much more focused and accountable and build more trust with the community, or you don't. I think it's a pattern we see in the nonprofit and private sectors. I think it's time to bring it to the public sector. We already do it for our appointees. We do it for our senior staff. We seem to be the only people in any sector who seem to think we're beyond having any of our pay tied to actual measurable results. So that's a philosophic difference we may have.
Sure, I think that it far outreaches just that specific point that you're making about this philosophical debate, right? I think that this leans into, when you're talking about our elections, this is about our democracy. This is about our ability to come in with diverse values and opinions and beliefs, work together holistically as a council to move forward policy that isn't going to make everybody happy 100%, but that's compromise and that's policy making, and that's not what I see moving forward with this pay for performance policy, and it concerns me. So thank you for hearing my comments.
Appreciate the comments. I'm still really struggling to understand how tying a bit of our pay to us hitting goals that we set for our city is somehow undermining our ability to serve our constituents or have a difference of opinion. I would argue it's the opposite. I think it invites more diverse viewpoints. If Councilmember Ortiz says, okay, we all agreed this was the goal and here's how I think we should hit it, and I say, well, I think we should hit it this way, and one of us gets some majority support for our position and we go implement it, now we have a measurable basis and we have a much more accountable system in which I might have been wrong. And Councilmember Ortiz come back and be like, hey, we didn't hit the goal. Like, let's try my idea for how we address RVs, because Mayor, your idea might have had 6 votes, but you were dead wrong. And I think that discipline and that our community knowing, like, we even have pay on the line. Like, we are very focused on delivering the results that affect your daily life constituents. I think it's just healthy and good for the culture. But again, we may not all agree that tying a portion of our pay will change anything about our behavior. I think it will. Some people may not think it will change behavior. I think in other sectors it's been generally proven to. I think Councilmember Cohen made the point, sometimes it has unintended consequences that we should guard against, but it definitely influences behavior. That's what I'm looking for, is that kind of impact. So let me go to Councilmember Cohen, and then we'll see if there are any other comments.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think let me just repeat what I believe Councilmember Campos is asking, and what I still haven't heard is what is expected and I'm not asking this question right now, I'm just saying it to repeat it. I have not heard what votes we would expect to change as a result of this. I heard the mention of trade-offs, making trade-offs, and that's exactly what Councilmember Ortiz is worried about, is we make trade-offs, and when it comes down to it, when I'm trying to fight for making sure that this year's budget doesn't adversely impact Alviso, people who use the Alviso Youth Center to play basketball, just as one example, because we're cutting weekend programs at the Alviso Youth Center, if that's not something that's going to affect my pay, and I have to cut from somewhere to make sure that something that affects my pay gets funded, I might not fight for those local things in my district because there's an ulterior incentive to conform to one goal of that the majority of the council had said was the goal of the council. I think that's the point here. It seems like the trouble here is accepting the fact that diverse viewpoints on the council is a strength and not a weakness. That the kinds of policies like this are put in place in order to sort of consolidate power and keep people in line and focused. I heard even if you even just say setting aside ideology, but that's exactly what we're here for, is to bring our ideology to the table as we have these conversations, not to set it aside. This kind of policy is meant to push people to set aside their ideology. I've been very disappointed this week. I read the Mercury News article this morning where the mayor was very dismissive of research-based concerns that I've raised during this process, calling them grasping at straws. Organizations that do research on effective democratic governance, the most prominent of which is the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, has studied this extensively. They caution about the potential for corruption, for short-term thinking, and for making poor budgetary decisions, for saddling future councils with short-term budgetary thinking without thinking about the long-term good of the city and its residents. Accusing council colleagues of being performative and not motivated to tackle the issues we face ignores the extreme public scrutiny that we are under every day as elected officials. This idea that we don't want to be held accountable is crazy. I would not run for this seat if I couldn't handle being held accountable. Every time I go to the supermarket, or I walk through my district, or I go to a community event, or I listen to people at a town hall, I'm being held accountable. I tell people, when people ask what this job is like, I tell them it's the only job I know where the people you work for want to fire you every day. So, and that's true. I mean, that's the kind of feedback we get. So the idea that we don't want to be held accountable should be off the table. Now, the question is, what does accountability look like, and how, and what are the things that we as individuals representing our own districts, what should we be fighting for? While we certainly all agree that homelessness is a problem, I'll give the example of this responsibility to shelter discussion. I've got an email from a resident yesterday who said, you seem to be opposing the responsibility to shelter policy, but there's homeless people behind my home right now, so you need to vote for it to get rid of them. This policy will not get rid of the homeless people behind that person's house. They're not on any list who's turned down, who's being offered shelter, therefore turning it down 3 times and therefore being moved. If they're causing a problem in the neighborhood, it's my job to work with staff to try to figure out how to get them moved, irregardless of the policies we set. And the folks in our district are going to hold us accountable for doing that, whether we put this in place or not. But the risks of putting a policy like this in place, to me, are too great for us to go down this path. So I just thought it was really important to clarify that, to clarify why I feel so strongly about this. To me, this is one of the most ill-advised policies that we've seen as a council. I'm sorry, I know some people feel strongly about this. We are not the same as private sector employees. We're not the same as long-term career public sector employees who have specific goals that they have to achieve as a result of the overall goals that we set as a council. We are a different, being elected officials it has a different nature, and has very different motivations, and has very different accountability. And I will continue to make the case that this policy is not going to move the needle in a direction that anybody wants it to. It'll just cause more division on this council as we try to agree on what goals are the ones that we're going to be held accountable on our salary for. Because you better know that I'm going to fight to make sure that not cutting libraries will be put on that list, right? That keeping our parks open will be put on that list. So at the end of the year, it's not just going to be about, did you move money from all those things over to solve this one issue, but are you still serving the residents of your community at the level they expect? So and again, we're talking about putting this in an ordinance in the city. That's not just about the current council sitting here on this dais. It's about the council 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and whether or not they'll be able to agree on a small subset of objectives, or whether they'll just be as silly as saying, well, our metric is how many ordinances we pass this year, and so we'll pass many as we can, we'll meet our objective, and we'll keep our pay. I mean, we don't know what every individual council will be thinking. I think this is a highly risky policy, and I cannot be convinced that this is the right way to hold us accountable. As I said, there are lots of things that hold us accountable, the media and our public. So thank you.
I will just note, a city ordinance is something that the council can change at any time pretty easily. We pass them all the time, and if this particular mechanism somehow led us to defund the libraries First of all, I think we would have many other feedback mechanisms for that. I think we'd all be hearing from our residents. I don't anticipate this producing that outcome, but certainly the council could change, can continue to evolve the approach as we have done throughout, as we've done with every budget message, as we do with ordinances throughout the year. So I don't see this as an inflexible, something we can never change. I think it's an advantage of going this way rather than taking it to the ballot. You know, here's some of your other points. I have some responses, but I don't want to keep going on or be too repetitive here. Let me go back to Councilmember Ortiz.
This green light always confuses me. Red means go, green means no. Just want to acknowledge, I saw the library staff look at each other when you were talking about defunding libraries. Don't worry. Hopefully that's not going to happen. We will make sure. There's other feedback loops that we will. You know, I appreciate the mayor that you're bringing things for us to talk about, new ideas. That's, you know, why I ran for office. You know, I came from tech. I used to work in tech. I used to work in the nonprofit sector. I think it's good to have these type of discussions. I don't agree with the policy, but I still think the conversation is good, and we should be engaging in new conversations as a body. You know, my concern with this is just, it seems like, you know, we talk on this council about data when it suits us, right? But data can be used for different perspectives, different arguments, especially when you yourselves are the ones who are setting the data posts, right? I mean, if this policy was in action, would we even be having, as you know, Councilmember Cohen mentioned, would we be even having the responsibility to shelter debate during this budget cycle? Wouldn't it have been more smarter to go to the county and say, hey, let's sit down, let's find a way to have a pathway forward instead of forcing something down their throat, which in my opinion is going to result in, you know, a waste of staff time, a waste of our police officers' times trying to, you know, go after unhoused, and then not have the outcome that we want them to have when the county just releases them. So I feel like we're picking and choosing how we use data, we're picking and choosing how we use evidence-based solutions, because responsibility to shelter doesn't have any evidence-based positive outcomes for us to look at. I don't know cities that have successfully implemented these types of policies. So we can't just say we want to make sure that our policies are following data-based practices when it suits us and ignore that when we don't want, right? There's no data that says that let's move away from affordable housing, not 100% away. Let's move all of our Measure E dollars from affordable housing to shelters. That's going to address, you know, unsheltered homelessness. But it's not going to address the houseless crisis. Time and time again, data shows that investing in affordable housing and housing solutions and tenant protections and expanding rent control is what addresses homelessness. There's nothing that says that these shelters are the solution, yet that is what this council is doing. And so I just feel like data can be used anyway. They can be used to back arguments. They can be used to dissect arguments. And I feel like a lot of these discussions aren't going to bring us to where the voters think we're going to get. And in my opinion, that is what performance is. That's what performative politicking is.
Thanks for the perspective and the dialogue. And look, I think with or without data, with or without pay for performance, we're going to definitely have deep debate. We're going to have disagreements over which policies work. I mean, just on responsibility to shelter, which is not the primary topic here, but we have had years of dialogue with the county, and the reality is we have very different institutional goals, different sense of urgency, different type of accountability, but those conversations continue, and I think we will continue to get closer to a shared service delivery model with the county, but we have to acknowledge they have very different institutional goals. We do see tools to compel severely addicted and mentally ill folks indoors and into treatment working in many places. Many other cities have already adopted versions of a responsibility to shelter. We used to use the court system to compel people into drug treatment, and actually, you know, since Prop 47 have seen the complete demise of our drug courts. So anyway, we could have a lengthy debate, but I think the topic at hand here is really a philosophic one, which is either believing that tying some of our pay to measurable results will be productive or not, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. I will just say, as I was reflecting on Councilmember Campos's question of what has this council or what have past councils not done that might be different, I would say, if you look at the community's top concerns, unsheltered homelessness, feelings of safety, blight, the reality is affordability. Of the community's top 3-4 issues, the reality is that we have not moved the needle. I do think in the last year or two, we've started to see in some of the dashboards actually some movement finally. But my motivation for pushing greater focus, goal setting, measurement, and accountability mechanisms like pay for performance is that, frankly, I think past councils, including those I've been a part of, have not driven hard enough at results and have not had any measurable progress to show for it. And that's really what motivates me to want to push us to think differently. Let me go to Councilmember Casey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of the pay for performance policy, and I think it reflects what my constituents are interested in seeing in local government. Just coming off a campaign, knocking on 20,000 doors and countless meet and greets, and the level of malaise and apathy that the folks have towards our political process and the disconnect they believe that exists between local politicians and the actual issues that are important to them. I think demonstrating to them that we have skin in the game hopefully will engender some sort of revitalization or reinvigorate them and let them know that we are serious about the issues that are important to them. And I think it demonstrates and it signals something positive. And honestly, was the one thing that really surprised me was the disconnect between the average person and what we do here at in the local government level. So I'm supportive of it for just that fact alone, just to demonstrate to our folks and our constituents that we are serious about the issues that are serious to them, and we're willing to put skin in the game.
Thanks, Councilmember. We go to Councilmember Condelis.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to switch us gears a little bit, put us in reverse for a little bit, because, for the public record, late Monday, we as a council, everybody here, received a letter from the county. It was signed by the board president, Otto Lee, the sheriff, and the district attorney for the fact that they are leaders and are responsible for key aspects of oversight and management of our county's criminal justice system, and they felt the need to share an important perspective on the city's potential adoption of new criminal penalties on our homeless residents. And, they go on to talk about the proposal released by the mayor in March, the responsibility to shelter, as well as the announcement last week on the enforcement of that said policy. And I'm going to quote, because of how important this letter is for my colleagues, just to reflect on this as we go through the iteration process that is creating this budget and sorting out this policy. Moreover, arresting and releasing individuals for low-level offenses does not advance public safety, and in fact, it diverts the already limited public safety resources away from enforcement efforts that keep our communities safe. They go on to ask that we, a city, consider the impacts of these additional unnecessary and ineffective arrests and bookings will have on our community's criminal justice system. It's important to talk about this and bring this letter to light, because we had this robust debate on Monday morning or Monday afternoon. And this letter came around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on Monday evening. And so, this is a positive indicator. I'm hoping that as we mull over this approach to this policy, we keep that in mind, because they end the letter, which is my closer is, they remain open to working with the city on productive, timely solutions that help protect public safety and deliver services, shelter and housing solutions for those in need. And I think that's critical, given we share that mutual goal, and we're in it for the right reasons. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilmember. I read the letter. We all read the letter and discussed it. I mean, look, I think appreciate the, you know, the
I'm sure you were going to
county's-
bring it up, Mayor, but I beat you to it, but it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, don't worry, I will have a letter for them. I appreciate the county's desire to continue to maintain the status quo and have the city by default deal with our homelessness crisis, our addiction crisis, our untreated mental illness crisis. It is hard to create accountability for crime. It is hard to build out inpatient treatment. Right now, the county is grappling with a complete lack of beds for mental illness, for addiction, and the reality is what we have seen, very sadly, and it is time for the city to be bold and push back and demand accountability from other levels of government, as we've seen the federal government push things down to states and localities. We've seen the state increasingly abdicate responsibility for this complicated set of issues of mental illness, addiction, homelessness, et cetera. We have now seen the county push it to the city. It's our residents, it's our first responders who are on the front lines of this crisis every day, and we will absolutely face institutional resistance, systemic resistance from other levels of government that do not want to take responsibility for helping our mentally ill and addicted neighbors who are
Point of
trapped
information,
on the
Mayor,
streets.
that their letter doesn't say that. Their letter
I understand the rhetoric,
wants to-
council member. I understand the rhetoric we've been hearing for years. Unless you've got something else on pay for performance, we're going to move on.
Well, but we're discussing the operating budget, and I don't think it's appropriate that you hinder
We're
my ability to
discussing
be able
pay
to
for
speak.
performance.
No. Nora, this is a question for the attorney. Am I allowed under this public forum to be able to ask questions on a policy that we're discussing within the budget today, or am I strictly restricted to some arbitrary title of a section that we are right now at this moment?
I think we're left over from the other day, but
So I
on
can ask questions
strategic,
about the
right now
proposal.
on strategic support.
Perfect.
And then we're going to get to fees and charges
so
and the
we're on
operating budget.
strategic support right
But right now we're on strategic support.
Okay, but it's on the proposed budget, the proposed operating budget for the 25-26 year, correct?
When you-
I can ask questions and I
when-
can talk to policies that we as a council are mulling over regarding the budget.
Of course, yes.
Okay, thank you, just wanted to confirm, thank you.
Did you want to continue?
Did, and, you know, Mayor, I think, you know, to say that the county is unwilling or doesn't want to or refuses to step up or, you know, I think that's a false narrative, and I don't think that's right, and I think we should have an opportunity as a council to be able to discuss this with the county, with them in the room, prior to doing a policy that's supposed to be effectuated by them. And so, in all fairness, you know, it's easy to say they refuse to do this, it's on them, but you know, we don't have them in the room to be able to articulate that point.
Great.
And so you know, the status quo for a long time has been to you know, not even provide people an opportunity or a place to go. And so we as a city are stepping up. As you've mentioned, we're building more interim solutions, we're building more RV safe parking places, and we have 1,400 units in the pipeline. So, you know, while we can talk about and we can do a performative show of, you know, we're gonna take a hard stance to those people who refuse to shelter, we haven't even built out the shelter to allow people an opportunity to go. So this is something that I'm hung up on, and you know, I read the letter into the record, and I didn't expect to have a debate of you know, a response to the letter because of, you know, your disagreement with it, but I just thought it was important enough for our colleagues and for the public to know that the county has major questions, and so do many other people in our community with regards to our approach to a problem that is affecting every single one of us.
Great. We will, to your point, we will continue to invite the county to a joint meeting. We'll continue to invite the county to put clinicians embedded in our 911 center for triage. We'll continue to ask them to maintain a clinician for the PERT teams. I do regularly meet with the county. I have monthly one-on-ones with the board president and most of the supervisors, with the DA, regular meetings with all of the leadership at the county. Invite everyone else here to also schedule regular one-on-ones with all of our county leadership. I've found folks to be willing to set up those meetings. I have been in the room for years as we've discussed these issues, and we're going to continue to collaborate with and work closely with the county. I do think it has become my observation over the last 4 or 5 years that there are some very different institutional goals and pressures between the city and county. I think that's natural, but that is the reality. But we will certainly continue to invite them to come to a joint meeting of the council and the Board of Supervisors. I think that would be great. We've done joint meetings in recent years, as some of you may know, and we'll continue to suggest that. I will just say for the record, though, I do think there's a fundamental difference between somebody who is being offered a solution to homelessness and accepts it, and someone who's being offered a solution to homelessness and says repeatedly, I'd rather stay outside. To me, that's a sign we need to intervene. Not to put someone in jail as falsely a lot of rhetoric has been indicating, but to try to petition to get them into a drug court or to get them over to the Mission Street Recovery Center to say, sorry, repeatedly saying, I want to camp here, I don't want housing, I don't want shelter, is unsustainable for our community, and is probably the best signal we have that somebody is deep in the throes of a behavioral health issue and needs some help, needs some intervention, which I would argue is actually the progressive and humane thing to do. But I do want to try to get us back to strategic support, but whatever. Councilmember Salas, whatever topic you want to talk on that is relevant to our operating budget, go ahead.
I was not going to comment on paper performance because, you know, I'm in a very interesting position here. I've never been in a situation like this, and the arguments of Campos, Ortiz, and the others are quite interesting in this position relative to pay for performance. So I wasn't going to comment on it. But when my colleague here brought up the letter, I have to tell you that I immediately wrote back to Supervisor Otto Lee, CC'd Betty Young. I enclosed your letter, and I think it's really important for all of us to realize that my constituents every day are calling me, and I think I heard Councilmember Ortiz say the same thing. We're in crisis on the homeless thing, and we have to take action. We can't sit here and talk and let's build some houses in 3 years. We have to deal with this as a crisis, and that's what I said. We need to triage. The other reason I took this job is because I feel like our city staff, tries to get to no quicker than they try to get to yes. And when I read that letter, the first thing I thought is, yep, here we go. Let's get to know before we actually look at things. That's why I enclosed the mayor's letter. I thought it was very well stated. So, and then finally, I just want to mention, last night I think we approved low-income housing for 3 or 4 different projects, significant. And we are making progress on all fronts, but we're in triage now. We are in crisis, and I think we're doing the right thing. And I hope, and I agree that we need to and should talk with the county. That's why I reached out to him. I was going to send the same letter to Jeff Rosen. It's just, we're in triage. We need to work together. We need to get to yes somehow. And I think we need to do it looking at it as emergency and triage, and not, let's keep on talking about this for the next 3 years.
Thanks, Councilmember. Let's go back to Councilmember Casey.
We have a feckless county who's been derelict in their duty, and the notion that we are going to sit here and set policies based on their lack of will to do what the people want is ridiculous. Most people don't know who their county supervisor is or what the county is responsible for, and we're the ones that catch hell. And so they get to sit back in the cuts and do nothing, and they've done nothing. So the idea that we're going to let that letter or whatever they're willing to do and not do dictate what we do is ridiculous.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Kameh.
So I guess I wasn't going to say anything, but whether it's pay for performance or responsibility shelter, I think that these are big decisions that we have to make. And I would like to believe that there's better optimism out there as we move out of what has been for the last, I want to say 5 years because of COVID, where we, I don't know, my impression was that everything pretty much shut down, things were not enforced. It takes, to move things, at least 3 years, right? We're in the 5th year, and we're finally seeing, I mean, yesterday was really, I thought, eye-opening in that we're getting movement on building. We're getting, so I think, you know, when I received the letter, I thought, well, you know, we've got new faces, new people, new ideas. And I think instead of shutting that door, we ought to figure out, hey, this is an opportunity where, okay, we've pushed. You know, the one thing that I will tell you about the responsibility to shelter is that when you push that hard and someone says, oh my gosh, are you really serious? Then it gets people's attention, right? I may not like it, but I do think that I would like to hope and think that we can sit down with the county supervisors, be able to come up with something that's more implementable. Because I think that there's a lot of talk, but, you know, I think about even the pay for performance. You know, no, I don't think any of us do this for the money, number one. And at the end of the day, who is doing the work? Who is actually going to get, you know, that street paved or do all, who is doing the work, right? I think it's very complex, right, to be able to, you know, figure out how would something like that work, right? That isn't, you know, that would answer Councilmember Campos's questions, address some of the things that, you know, everyone has said. I don't think we do it for the money, but I do think that it's a driver, right? So I think it's going to be difficult to you know, figure out, okay, which are the goals, what are the outcomes, and all of that. But I also think that it is, you know, the city staff that does the work, or our staff that does the work. And so I think that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult. And I hear Councilmember Cohen's cautions and concern because it has happened where, you know, unintended consequences do happen. So I think that there's validity. So how we navigate that, I don't know. But I will say that, you know, I think that this is an opportunity to really do better. We can be better. And there are new people at the county that I think want to be better. So my hope is that we don't get to this sort of back and forth, and actually sit down and do something for our community. At the end of the day, it is all of our community, not just the county, not just the city, not just the state, and all of that. We need to find solutions together. So I want to assume good intent, and I want to be able to do whatever I can to make sure that we meet with them to get some things done. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. I think that's well said. Thanks for all the comments, feedback, questions, and look, I think the exciting thing about trying new things is, you know, we may get different outcomes, and we have an opportunity as a body. I have a lot of faith in this group, maybe perhaps especially because of our disagreement, that we'll take an iterative approach, and we will learn as we go, and we'll make adjustments, and we will only get better together going forward. So I actually really appreciated the conversation today, and the fact that we don't all agree, I think, is very healthy. So thank you all for your comments. And with that, we're going to transition now to fees and charges. My understanding is we do not have a formal presentation, but everybody has the book. It's a lot of fees and charges, Jennifer. So if folks have questions on specific fees and charges, we will entertain those now. I'll pause for a few seconds here, let people check their notes and see if they do have any questions.
And maybe as we pause, I'll just ask the team for the capital presentation to make their way down so we can transition to capital once we're ready.
Yeah, just on fees and charges, though, let's see. I did want to ask one question on fees and charges. Jim, I assume I'm asking you, most likely?
Let's start with me,
Okay,
and then
we'll
I'll
start with
divvy
you.
off.
I did notice, at least percentage-wise, a couple of fees that were application fees are going up pretty dramatically. The two that caught my attention were the commercial linkage fee standard application and the cannabis initial fee application process. So as I understand, I could be wrong, and this is why I'm asking the question. These are applications for, they're applications that would then indicate how much of a fee you need to pay, I assume. But the increases are 51% and 144% respectively. Obviously, the whole dollar amounts are not as big, but I just wanted to understand why for something as seemingly routine as a fee application, a standard fee application or an initial fee application, we're seeing these big increases. What's going on there?
Yeah, I think I'll start this off. I think we do, as part of the fees and charges process every year, we are needing to update the fees to be, they're supposed to be cost recovery fees. And so we do a global update of all the cost elements that are included in those fees. So the different staff that are assigned to the fee process. So we make sure that we update those. And then also, as we go through the process, departments are trying to update the estimated time spent. We call that sometimes a time study, the time spent to do a certain piece of work. And so that may change on a, we can't do that for every fee for every year because there are so many, but there are times when the department reassesses the time spent doing a particular item of work. And so that gets updated as part of the fee process. And I believe that's what happened with those two items, unless the housing department or police department want to correct me on that.
Okay, and how, aren't we assessing the cost and therefore the fee recovery, what we need for fee recovery on an annual basis? I'm just trying to understand why the jump would be so great when we don't see wages go up that quickly. Did something change about these applications?
Yeah, so I think when you see a larger increase like that, it's a reevaluation of the actual time spent and the different types of staff spending on that piece of work. So updating
So
the
we've
assumptions.
reassessed how many hours it's actually taking us. Okay,
Correct.
that leads then to my final question / comment, which is, to what extent are we looking at automation of these applications and or fee calculators or using tools to reduce the number of hours it takes to calculate a commercial linkage fee, for example?
Well, I believe that probably is going to vary on the different types of fees. I think some of the fees, the application fees are not, they require, a human to do pieces of work to figure out what the next steps are in the process. So I think there's going to be an element that will be automated, but there's also just a human being that needs to do the work for whatever that fee application evaluation is requiring.
Okay, well, I mean, there may be a different forum for this. This is not a place where, today we're not giving direction or voting on anything, but I will just say for, just to share my opinion on this in case colleagues are interested, look, we have fees that are becoming prohibitive for different actors in the ecosystem. We have conditional use permits for small businesses that on average, as I understand it, are costing $30,000, and Campbell, they're costing $6,000. They're a fraction of that. They're 1/5 the cost. I know we're doing some analysis of that. Commercial linkage fee, we want more jobs. We're saying it's going to cost $2,000 just to apply to find out what your fee is. I would love to, cannabis, it's thousands of dollars to apply to find out what your fee is. I would encourage us, and this again is a future conversation to the extent that staff isn't already doing this, but to really look at, can we get fee calculators, automated processes where somebody can upload a digital application and have it spit out and like TurboTax just tell me what my taxes are. It should not take hours of expensive staff time to review permits and tell people what their fees are. I mean, I really think we got to push ourselves to spend fewer hours on that's translating into higher fees for people in our community that want to do the things we want: bring jobs, build housing, expand their businesses.
I think that that's a very fair comment. I would just clarify that not all the application fees are just to understand what your fees are going to be. I think there's work just to get you into the program. So there may be some examples where we're doing work to tell you what your fees are, but a lot of the application fees that are throughout the document are to get folks into a program, not to calculate what their fees are.
Okay, fair enough. There's a distinction there, but the one I pointed to on commercial linkage fee, I think, is the fee to understand the fee. To just
I wonder maybe if the housing department could come down to talk a little bit more about the commercial linkage fee if we want to get into that one.
Maybe I've got it wrong. I'm just trying to understand here. I lost where was my note? It's the application for the commercial linkage fee. It's not the actual per square foot fee, right?
Okay.
There's a difference.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So now if I want the privilege of building some employment space where I would hire and pay people to do jobs, and I'm going to get charged a linkage fee for affordable housing, in order to know what my linkage fee is that I have to pay per square foot for affordable housing in order to provide jobs, I then have to pay $2,000, which is 50% higher than last year, to know what the fee is.
Okay, so I'll provide some context, and then I'll get into that one specifically.
But did I more or less get it?
Yes.
That was accurate, right?
That's the application fee,
okay.
Correct. But let me provide
that should be $50 or nothing,
yes.
Because you're telling me what I'm paying you.
So here is the overall structure, and then I'll get into specifically that fee. We looked at all the fees across the board. So if we go through the entirety of the housing department fees, a lot of them were either flat, a lot of them also came down because we adjusted for three primary factors. First, in looking across the fees, what we had was an imbalance where we weighted the percentage of cost, salary costs, for division managers, deputy directors, and myself, much higher than lower fees. So we reversed that. And that allowed other fees to come down. Two, we then looked at the overall calculation of how we're getting to beyond just the labor standard, looking at what's the actual cost of workflow, and started digging into that. A lot more work needs to be done and making adjustments that way. Then three is we looked at these application fees, these one-time application fees. We haven't had historically the data collected to better understand what exactly is the cost of processing that application, which goes back to two. So we took the essential inflator that we've had previous years and applied that because we don't quite understand what the number is yet. So now as we're going forward and doing that workforce analysis, we'll be in a better position to better understand. So what is the actual cost of moving that application forward other than the divisor of just labor cost by hours?
Got it. Thank you. Makes a ton of sense. Look, I appreciate you taking such a rigorous approach, to use an overused term we've used a lot today, a very data-driven approach, it sounds like, and right-sizing, and that you even were able to bring down some fees. I think that's awesome. I'm not trying to cherry-pick one that went up 50%. I guess I am by definition. But I just want to make the point. Yeah. It sounds like we're doing great work. I appreciate it. I think to the extent that we can create a self-serve interface, a TurboTax-like approach where it's just simpler, fewer hours. I put in my information, I get spit out a fee. Even if we don't get it perfect, it'll actually be better for everyone. We'll save a lot of grief and a lot of time and a lot of cost in the long run, I think, to move toward just more kind of almost digitized, automated fee calculators for these things. But anyway, I hear all the work you're doing. I appreciate it. Okay.
And Mayor, that's right. And just to piggyback on what Eric was saying with the review that they did, that commercial linkage fee also did not have in prior years the fringe and the overhead that is normally associated with fees. So part of that analysis was also making sure that cost was a fully burdened cost. So that was another reason why that fee went up.
I get it. And so we better captured the full cost of doing that assessment of what your fee ought to be in the status quo way of calculating what your fee ought to be. I'm challenging the status quo way of calculating how your fee ought to be, which is less human time, probably not that much fun to calculate the fees anyway. Let's just, how complicated can it be? It's a number of dollars per square foot. I don't know. If it's so complicated, it takes a lot of bespoke calculation, like maybe we've over-designed it, over-engineered it. Let's just simplify it and let somebody input some stuff into the form with the building department when they apply for the permit and just spit out the fee. We should make these things simpler and more digitized. Anyway, all right, I have repeated myself too much. Let's go to Councilmember Campos.
Thanks, Mayor. And thank you, Jim, and to the staff for helping put this report together. I wanted to pick up on the mayor's concern for fees as a potential burden to our local businesses. Particularly, we know that childcare operators are in a cost-sensitive market. They run on extremely thin profit margins, and we understand that permitting fees can sometimes be a deterrent to our small businesses. So can staff please provide me with examples of fee waivers or reductions that the city has provided to encourage or facilitate particular uses or community serving businesses? Is that a practice that we already employ? And what are some examples?
Well, for businesses, I'm trying to sort of see which ones are out there. I know we do a number of waivers that are built into our ability. So I know that the Parks Department has ability to set and lower and waive fees. The Public Works Department has the ability to do that for the animal care and services, for example, so we're much lower than the cost recovery level for that service. I know also when we are looking at reevaluating our fees as part of this process, if we do have a fee that is likely to impact a small business and it has a large jump on a year-over-year basis, we often will phase in that fee over a series of years. So if it was a large increase, instead of getting, like, say, that fee was going to go up by 50%, we often will be recommending a multi-year phase-in to that fee. If any folks have an example they want to share forward for a specific waiver for a specific business, I would appreciate that. If not, I will continue to look.
And I think, Jim, we have several hardship programs as well that are embedded in there.
Thanks. I see John coming down if you want to add more context.
Thank you. John Cicerelli, Director of Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services. Councilmember Campos, we do, to the city manager's point, have discount programs, particularly for nonprofits, new startups. We even offer starter grants. And so we do have ways to reduce barriers for groups that are trying to break in or get in the market. They're not quite as established. Through our neighborhood program now, we're going to start trying to actually use established neighborhood associations to help less established neighborhood associations, so without costing anything, right? So the idea is, for us, we have a lot of competitors in the market for the things we do, whether it's after school or summer camp or swim programs or leisure programs. So we're constantly looking at our fees, and we're constantly aware that our competitors are really focused on paying customers, and we know there's a gap there. As you're aware, we offer a lot of scholarships for our programs, making them free or almost free. So there are a lot of things we do to try to ease that burden in Pureness.
Yeah, thank you. That's great to hear. And as we're making these decisions, does the city solicit input from the development and business community on proposed fee increases?
Could you please repeat that question?
Yeah, so does the city solicit input from development and business community on these proposed fee increases?
Yeah, I wonder if Chris can come down for that.
Councilmember Chris Burton, Director of Planning, Building Code Enforcement. Just to go back to your previous question, there is one other example we've used for community service, serving sort of businesses or social service agencies. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago, there was money set aside post-COVID for social service agencies that were providing food services in the community that were required to get a special use permit. There was actually money set aside to offset the cost of those permits rather than it being a waiver or a reduction. So because of the cost recovery nature of our business, that's typically how that's been approached in the past. So I think that's one other example. Specifically to this question, typically we go through the process on fee increases across both planning, building, and we work with our development services partners for all of those permits that do affect businesses. While we don't sort of garner input necessarily on sort of how we establish that, we do outreach and coordination on the back end to let them know in advance of these hearings that those fees are going up.
Thank you. So I suppose that this is the opportunity for council to share feedback and thoughts about the fees. And, it's great to hear that as a city, we do value those partners in our community who may not have the financial means to stand up a business on their own. And I think that the state has been incredibly innovative in passing legislation that supports home-based family child care providers in not having to pay business or permitting fees so that they can operate their critical small business at a cost that will be that will allow them to at least have some kind of profit, because typically in the child care sector, again, they are operating on very thin margins. So recognizing that locally we also have a role to play, whether it's through the fees, it would be, my guidance or hope that our city can look at this sector and identify some opportunities so that we can support a critical small business that is essential to not just today's workforce, but tomorrow's workforce as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mulcahy.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Oh, Chris, I'm sorry. Where'd you go? Yeah, I wanted to sort of just talk about a little bit of the PBCE items. I love the fact that there's a lot of no change pages, but for those where we do have changes, just sort of the philosophy, I think a lot of it is some around the planning side of things, hourlies and so forth. You know, over the years, I've probably sat on 10 plus committees, blue ribbon task force, you know, how do we help the development process move faster, get more value? And I think by and large, the thing I always heard was, we'll pay the fee if we get the service. We'll pay the fee if we get the quality in return for that value. So what are we doing? How are we staffed? You know, I think especially maybe in planning, and you kind of nodded when I acknowledged that it looks like we've got a big bump, not a big, but many bumps in that area. Talk to me about how we're ready, you know, to accept more opportunity through our planning side, asking our customers to pay more, and what kind of service can we guarantee them?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councilmember. I think a couple of important pieces on this. So as we look at the planning fees, they're established based on a fee study that was updated back in 2016. We had a consultant come through. Essentially, when you sort of break down our planning fees, all of those application fees, you know, they're intended to be cost recovery. So we take the total cost to run the operation, you know, and we divide that by the available productive hours and the overhead. And it gives us an hourly rate. And then, you know, to the earlier conversation about assumed hours on a task labor average, we sort of create the fees based on that. And part of the challenge around how that's created is all projects are created equal. And so the ability to sort of have an enhanced service within that is limited unless we can sort of demonstrate that in other ways. And we've done it in kind of limited instances in the past. You'll be aware there are a couple of programs in the building department that look at expedited sort of tenant improvement type programs where we've actually managed to be able to carve that out. That's not to say it's not possible. I think we're on the front end right now of kind of looking into different ways of approaching that. So for some time, in collaboration with the Office of Economic Development and Cultural Affairs, we've had a facilitation role that's sort of layered on top of our development process. About a year ago, we moved that back down into PBCE, and we've started to reposition that work around key projects where we can add a layer of enhanced service that's really focused on communication and coordination. It's very limited based on kind of the amount of staffing we have for that now. But I think we're setting that up, just kind of consider that in the future of how we could potentially expand that to drive those projects. I think the other part to your question is, you know, we are looking to the future. I think the next 12 months are uncertain. for most people, but there's a chance, right, that we see a significant uptick in activity across all of the development services partners. So that's something that we're looking at now so that we can adjust quickly. When we went through last year's budget cycle, there was a number of positions, certainly in the building group and some in planning, where we'd had long-term vacancies, and we reduced those long-term vacancies through that process. And in those discussions, you know, part of the response around that is we've always held vacancies just in case we see the uptick in activity. And so I got assurances from Jim that, you know, should we see that and we need to add those positions, we can use things like peak staffing or go to add positions quickly as we see activity come back.
So on your, let's stay on planning just for a moment. So in your planning division, where are you on vacancy currently?
So I'm just trying to think, because we had, we're less than 10%. I don't have the exact number on the top of my head, but we've worked pretty hard over the last 2 years to ensure that we've filled almost all of our vacancies. We've had a couple of recent departures, but we're not sitting on ongoing vacancies. What you'll actually see through our budget proposals is there were a couple of reductions where we've seen a decline in activity across the board, but right now we're keeping all of our positions filled.
So when you're trying to figure out that cost of that planning sort of part of your business, are you including vacants, you know, positions you don't have a body in as far as the number you have to go out and cover with your cost recovery?
So it's baked into that, but typically we're assuming kind of the staffing.
Jim's nodding his head behind
yeah, I mean,
you. I can
we
see
do,
that.
But
so I guess the question then is, for me, right, the more people we have working on these projects, hopefully the higher value of the return on whoever's making that investment here. Are we equipped to deliver the service that we need to deliver for increasing fees?
Are we? Let me just.
Well, you know, do we have enough of the staff? We're charging a higher rate based on vacant positions we don't have. Are we able to cover, you know, an increasing, you know, fingers crossed, series of applications in this way?
Yeah, and like I said, certainly at the sort of line staff level, which is where the productive hours are that go into the fee, we're not holding vacancies at all. We've filled all of those positions. I think minus 1 or 2 recent departures, which we're now looking to activate those recruitments. We're not holding vacancies in fee-funded positions. So yes, we're prepped to meet that demand. The question is, if we see a significant shift in demand, certainly upwards, how quickly can we respond to that? Because we will need to look at how we expand our capacity based on that.
Yeah, and I just want to just double down on that. Yeah, so we're not budgeting vacant positions that we assume are going to be vacant throughout the year. There are just a natural churn of some positions currently are vacant, some are filled, and so that's all part of the budget. But we're not holding any positions vacant by any means, just as a saving strategy that are then going to increase the fee. So I just want to be clear about that. And for sure, if we see activity ticking up such that Chris doesn't have enough bodies to do the work, we can come to council on any given Tuesday and add those positions to the fee program.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Councilmember Kamei.
Thank you so much. This was brought up the other day in terms of library fines, and you know, I actually am looking at page 65 of the fees and charges, and it says that the proposed fee is a no charge, and last time we weren't, when it came up previously, I just want to make sure that that was a question that came up previously, and we wanted to continue the no charge, because I think that some people thought that this was more permanent and not just year to year, but is the proposal no charge? I mean, it says no charge.
Well, I think it might say no change.
Oh, no change.
No change.
Oh,
but,
no change.
but I think we're going to actually bring
I saw no charge.
If I wouldn't mind having Jill come down to chat about it, we actually do plan to change it though to be able to waive the fees without a revenue impact, and Jill can sketch that out.
This is what happens when you have bad eyes.
It's so close. I had the same reaction, actually, Councilman, when I read it. So, yes, Jill Bourne, City Librarian, thank you for the question. We were lucky enough to have council support last year for a one-time waiver of all late fees. And this year, because it was a one-time, it is recurring in the fees and charges. And so we're working closely with the City Manager's Budget Office to develop a Manager's Budget Addendum that would, again, eliminate that late
For
fee.
this
And I
next
think
year.
our plan is hopefully permanently by offsetting it with another potential source of revenue.
But just to clarify, Jill, the late fines are waived for children's and young adults on an ongoing basis, correct?
Correct. The only
So-
one that recurred because it was one time was late fees for materials for adults.
So that's what we're going to come back with in an MBA to propose waiving those permanently. So everything will be waived permanently.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I was just, I read that incorrectly, sorry. I thought that was an R, not an N, so, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councilmember. Let's go now to Councilmember Salas.
Yeah, just one question for Jim. The report we talked about last night about the code enforcement report, they had a peer city review of number of things, and I thought the mayor's point about what do our peer cities charge for the same service was interesting. Jim, I'm sure in all your spare time you have a chance to do that, but have you looked, I mean, what Councilperson Campos was bringing up the fact about getting feedback, but also our peer cities, and they have a couple of them, I think it was San Diego, Seattle, and Fresno, that they considered equal for various reasons. Have you looked at how our fees compare to any of what we'll call the peer cities?
Thanks for the question. I have not looked at those specifically to compare those specifically to any peer cities. Although we want to be sort of cognizant of what we're doing and how it is impacting the public, a lot of our fees first have to start with what our costs are to deliver the service. So that's a key tenet of the fees and charges program, is that the council is desiring the fees provided directly to a customer to be 100% cost recovery to the extent possible. And then we have to make sure that the costs that are built into that fee is correct and is allocated appropriately. So that's our main focus as a part of that. Is a part of our process that's looking, as I maybe said earlier, it's looking maybe it's too high of a cost increase in a given year, or there are other factors that we need to consider. Then we would come forward to council to say, hey, maybe these should be lower than a cost recovery level for X factors. But I have not personally looked at those jurisdictions for that fee category. But I don't know if Chris has any other color there.
I'm just going to jump in. Some of our major utility fees, you're going to see some of those coming forward separately outside of the fees and charges document. You will see comparisons on those and how we do compare to other jurisdictions. So on those, especially those very costly items to our residents, you will see some of that comparison in those memos.
And I might jump into is that you may be referring also to the fines, which would be different than a fee. So a fine is, goes through a different basis to what that should be assessed by, where the fee is to recover the cost for the work generally. But the fines are sort of, punitive in nature and can vary. And are generally, except for library fines, which is weird, are not really a part of this book.
Thanks, Councilmember. I don't see any other hands. So that was fees and charges, which moves us on to our final session, which is on the proposed capital budget. We have a staff presentation, so we'll jump into that now.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so I'm going to turn this over to our capital budget coordinator in the City Manager's Office, Jennifer Tell, who helps put together our second giant budget book that you see before you, and then she'll turn it over to Matt Lesh, our Public Works Director, to talk about the individual capital programs.
Thank you, Jim. I will provide an overview of the proposed budget and the funding sources for the 5-year capital improvement program. And as Jim said, then I will turn it over to Public Works Director Matt Lesh to discuss some of the program highlights. This capital budget is the culmination of the work of staff in the airport, environmental services, fire, library, parks, recreation and neighborhood services, police, public works, and transportation departments. We want to acknowledge their diligent efforts prioritizing the city's capital needs and balancing them with available resources as presented in this proposed 5-year capital improvement program, or CIP. There are 14 capital programs in that fall under the city service areas. We will review program highlights in each of these 6 city service areas, or CSAs. As noted in last week's overview of the proposed operating budget, next year's proposed budget reflects a $5.3 billion recommended spending plan across 145 different funds. This presentation is focusing on the 18% or $1.2 billion slice of the budget pie that is made up of the capital funds. Here's a historical comparison of the 5-year CIP over the last 10 years. For fiscal years 26 to 30, the CIP totals $3.4 billion. While smaller than last year's CIP, once funds to complete existing projects in the various capital programs are rebudgeted from 24-25 to 25-26 as part of the adopted budget process, the total amount of funding in the 25-26 capital budget and the 26 to 30 CIP is expected to increase. The fiscal years 20 to 24 and 25 to 29 CIPs were the largest to date. A large contributor to these CIPs was the Measure T Disaster Preparedness, Public Safety and Infrastructure Bond passed by voters in November 2018. This measure authorized the city to issue up to $650 million in general obligation bonds for investments in emergency and disaster response facilities and infrastructure such as roads and flood and water quality protection. In this proposed CIP, we see exhaustion of Measure T funds anticipated in fiscal year 2028 to 29. Oops. New this year is a 2-year presentation of the budget, the 25 to 27 proposed biennial capital budget. Given the long-term nature of planning for city infrastructure investments, the proposed biennial capital budget highlights strategic investments planned to move forward in the first 2 years of the CIP. And not having to produce a complex published document every other year provides additional capacity to focus on capital program development and delivery, as well as long-range fiscal planning. While staff will bring annual capital funding decisions to City Council each fiscal year, the complete development of the proposed capital budget document will be presented every 2 years. In the intervening year, staff will present updates to the second year of the biennial capital budget to rebalance the capital funds in the CIP. These annual updates will be brought forward to the City Council as part of the annual budget process, as well as estimated funding for the new 5th year to ensure that the City Council is annually approving a 5-year capital spending plan consistent with the city charter. Of the $3.4 billion in the total 5-year CIP, $1.2 billion is budgeted in 25-26, and $676 million is budgeted in 26-27. The second year of the proposed biennial capital budget is substantially lower than the first year, and this is typical due to our process of carrying forward or rebudgeting unspent appropriations for multi-year capital projects. The first year of the capital budget includes some of these estimated carryovers. The mid-biennial update that we will present next year will show the estimated carryovers into 26-27 as necessary. Here's a breakdown of the funding source categories for the $3.4 billion 5-year CIP. We'll go into more depth for the top 5 categories listed here. Financing proceeds is the largest source of funds in the capital improvement program, providing almost $864 million, down slightly from $880 million in the CIP adopted last year. Similar to the last CIP, the largest use of financing proceeds is in the Water Pollution Control Capital Program, with $320 million of wastewater revenue notes and bond proceeds for the implementation of capital projects identified in the planned master plan. New in the CIP is the use of $69 million in sanitary sewer revenue notes to support capacity improvement projects. The next largest funding source is contributions, loans, and transfers between funds. The largest transfers of funds are from the Sewer Service and Use Charge Fund to the Water Pollution Control and Sanitary Sewer Capital Programs. Fees paid by the users of the sanitary sewer system are used for capital projects in these programs, as well as operating costs. The proposed CIP includes approximately $53 million in contributions from the general fund. The largest allocations for fire apparatus replacement and replacement of the 911 dispatch backup generator. The amount of general fund contributions in the proposed CIP is substantially lower than the last adopted CIP because we do not carry forward existing general fund appropriations for capital projects in the proposed CIP. As part of the year-end cleanup process, the amount of general fund contributions in the 26 to 2030 CIP will likely increase. Revenue from other agencies represents approximately $644 million of funding, down 19% from $795 million in the last adopted CIP. The decrease is largely attributable to a decrease in FAA grants that is significantly influenced by the deferral of the Terminals A and B ramp rehabilitation projects until airport passenger activity recovers. For reference, federal grant funding is primarily received by the Traffic Capital Program with $92 million in the proposed CIP and the Airport Capital Program with $32 million in the CIP. The decrease in federal funding in the proposed CIP does not yet reflect ongoing uncertainty around federal grants. Staff is actively monitoring the status of federal grants for capital projects. As we know more, staff will return to City Council to adjust and reprioritize capital funding as necessary. Taxes, fees, and charges funding is up slightly from $561 million to $572 million. Airport passenger facility charges are estimated to be down by $25 million to $111 million. However, construction and conveyance tax is estimated to be up by $27 million compared to the last adopted CIP to $267 million. The beginning fund balance is made up of money carried over from prior year allocations. There are plans for most of this money to ensure that existing projects are continued and to be spent pending the determination of a final scope for projects, final project locations, and/or availability of future funding. This amount will increase as part of the year-end cleanup process when capital appropriations not spent this year return to fund balance. Still, compared to last year's proposed CIP, which did not include carried over dollars, the amount of beginning fund balance in this proposed CIP is down 23% from $613 million last year. The decrease in beginning fund balance is largely due to exhaustion of Measure T funds by 2028-29. Those were the main funding sources for the capital program. Now we will talk about the expenditures or use of funds. This chart shows where the $3.4 billion of investments will be made. The water pollution control and traffic capital programs each make up approximately a quarter of the CIP, followed by the airport at almost 15%, and parks and community facilities at about 12%. Now I will turn it over to Matt Lesh to discuss program highlights.
Good morning. Matt Lesh, Director of Public Works. Get to talk about some of the most fun things we get to do, and we get to build stuff. I get to represent all of the folks that build it in the different departments, and so just to be the spokesperson here, but there are many people that are charged with all of the work and all the planning and all the implementation for this on all the funding sources that were talked about here. Wrong button. For Measure T, this is, as Jennifer noted, all of the public safety and infrastructure bond projects. This next cycle will have, again, continued street repair and lots of road fixes and public safety buildings and some additional storm drain improvement projects in different areas of town. On developer-assisted projects, this is a smaller fund in which they support usually these underground projects, which are funded 20A and 20B, some developer-funded, some PG&E funded projects. They go dreadfully slowly. They wish they'd be able to move them along quite nicely. This Delmas Park project that's listed here is a small bit of a project to finish off a prior project to get that one area completely done. But we have some work going on in Monterey and Lincoln and Kirk that are in the planning areas, and same thing with McKee and Pearl. Some continued 20A and 20B projects in this next cycle. This slide has about $1.2 billion worth of work. So it does this slide carries a lot of weight with the things that are going here. On the sanitary sewer side, that is where we're building out some of the collection system of the sewer system. And so we'll have a large project on the 4th Major Interceptor and the Southwest Expressway. We also have, on the storm side, we have some smaller projects, but some large trash capture device to support the MRP permit and Measure T projects, and some small trash capture devices, which is going to be a new thing for us to put in. As usual, RWF through ESD at the Regional Wastewater Facility has massive projects that will be going on in the next few cycles, especially in the next couple of years, with the aeration tanks and blower rehab and the plant security system that are going to be implemented. Again, continued massive projects. And then the Muni Water side, they're going to be putting in this advanced metering system so we can get more a better progress and monitoring of the pipes and the systems and the water flow. Plus, there are also some maintenance projects. And in this year, we'll be turning on and opening up their beautiful administration building for them. On the neighborhood services CSA, we have the library has many grants and some physical improvements. Plus, this is also where they buy their books and some of the operating systems within the building in terms of the capital improvement, and so there's some of those there. On parks, there's some very large projects and lots of little projects. Some highlights there is the Camden Park All-Inclusive and the Lake Cunningham Watershed Program, plus also the Alum Rock Park Road improvements. Here we have Councilmember Doan throwing dirt on Mayor Mahan for the groundbreaking for Fire Station 32. We have many other projects that will be moving on in here. We're buying fire apparatus. We're building starting Fire Station 36, completing the training center, PLIA B upgrades, and the 911 call center upgrade finally getting going this year. Fire Station 32 moving along, and the Fire Training Center FF&E. At the Transportation Aviation Services CSA, Airport is going to have some short-term projects as we're building through it, but these are very large in terms of their impact. The accessibility upgrades, Airport has been doing a great job improving the accessibility throughout their plant, and so they're continuing on some accessibility projects and some safety projects like their sprinkler replacements. And the airfield configuration, those things are very large projects, the large civil projects, and improving their taxiways and lighting systems and electrical systems there. We brought to you the Market Street Garage facade improvements and the other areas there. Finally, some elevator improvements. Hopefully, Councilmember Salas, I didn't get your text that the things weren't working, so I'm assuming they are working. At least they were that weekend. And then on the traffic side, we obviously DOT is going to have some continued massive paving projects and some Vision Zero projects and some large couplet projects that we're putting in. Plus, this is where the copper theft and copper replacement improvements would be done. Finally, some of the smaller areas, but very, very critical. This is on the communications side. We continue the upgrade and maintenance of the radio communication replacements and keeping them current so that every time our officers or firefighters press the button on their radio, it works and they get to talk to people in need. They can communicate. It is one of our most critical functions that we provide. And so the building, maintaining, and the replacement of those systems. Municipal improvements, we have some investments in fire control panels and a very critical generator replacement at the 911 call center. And then the service yard where our people work, we have a fueling island that needs to get completed at the central service yard because of the congestion in the areas of moving vehicles around and the increasing population there of our staff, and then obviously some simple roof replacements and things like that that we would need to be doing. And we'll leave you here. We're open for questions. There's many staff here, and this is the last picture I'll share with you. This is the largest regional stormwater collection facility on the West Coast that was just opened up in District 4. Many more of those to come. We're ready for your questions.
And it is beautiful. Councilmember Cohen and I had the opportunity to go out for the opening. Really, really impressive facility, as is so much of the work our teams do to deliver these capital budgets and improve infrastructure for everyone in our city. We try to get to the mic here. All right, we will start with Councilmember Campos.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the team, and congratulations on all the hard work and effort. When you see the fruits of your success, like opening West Coast's largest what is it, stormwater drainage. I mean, that's awesome. That's just a testament to the great work that we do here at the City of San Jose. So truly just want to thank all of the CSAs, all of the directors and the staff who have helped my team and I through this first budget year process. I did just have a couple of questions. I saw on slide 14 under Measure T, Public Safety and Infrastructure Bond Fund Spending Plan, the last bullet point was community centers / emergency shelters at $1.6 million. And those are two very different buildings. So I'm curious, what do we have a distinction for how much was spent in each?
So what this project, so there was, sorry Jennifer, there was multiple projects that were embedded in this piece. Mostly we were enabling our community centers to be powered by generators so that we can, they're modifying the electrical systems so that we can bring in large generators to support them as emergency shelters. Because what we found, especially in flooding cycles and plus power shutoffs, when we needed to make them support a larger population of people, we needed to provide more power and more connections for our HVAC systems so that we can make them into emergency shelters. So that's primarily what those projects were. One project was a little more enhanced because we needed to do some things in the kitchen. We needed to reorient some of the use of that facility, plus make it a department operations center for our parks department there. And so there was a little more enhanced there, but primarily it was to make them, our community centers, ready to be emergency shelters as we need to use them.
And just as a clarification, also, that was the total project cost is a $12.6 million project cost, so the 1.6 is sort of the remaining amount to be spent in 25, 26. We got a little detail page that talks about the different community centers on page 573 of the capital budget for your future reference.
Okay, thank you for that response and clarification. I think my next question might be for Eric Sullivan, because it's related to what I saw in the operating budget. There was a indicator called Housing Facilitation Effectiveness, and it rates the percentage of residents rating the city's facilitation of housing as good or excellent. We right now are at the lowest that we've been in the past 4 years that it shows metrics here at 8.6% affordable housing and 11% market rate. So I'm curious what the goal is. What is that metric trying to tell us? If Eric or someone else could answer that, please.
I think Eric might have left. I know this is a focus on the capital side. I don't, so we may have to get that answer to you in a different form.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was that measured in the capital book, or that was in the CSA section of the operating book?
It's in this, so it's on, it's in the operating budget on page 254 print, 266 PDF.
Okay.
And if staff doesn't have it handy, we should definitely get it to the council member offline. I know we've moved on to the capital budget, so we may not have all the staff here to answer questions on the operating budget.
So Jim, can you make sure that Director Sullivan follows up with compost later today?
For sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, council member. Let's go to council member Kamei.
As you said, this is the fun stuff when you can build all of this. I especially like your slide 15, 16, 17, just really, I don't know, I like infrastructure projects. And I know that many of them go hidden and, we know it's happening, but we don't really, it's sort of like behind the scenes. So I just wanted to say thank you because you deliver a lot of projects. And you do it quietly. But they're so critically important, things that are not visible to the eye sometimes because they're covered over, but really add to a tremendous quality of life, including the very last one about the stormwater capture facility. I think that because that area is, you know, sort of low, it really provides a safety valve for those times when we have overflows. So thank you so much for that. I guess I see that, you know, in 25, 29, when you look at the historical, you were much higher last year. Are you lower because your output is going to be less? I mean, are you going to do less projects, or you're going from 4 to 3.4?
Yeah, I think that's primarily going to be just because as part of the proposed budget process, we sort of, we don't quite have all of the funds that are going to be carried over for projects that are currently in process that will be carried forward and or rebudgeted into 2026. Okay. So we do a lot of that as part of the proposed, but we start this process pretty early on. And so we clean that up in that process actually right now. So submittals are coming to the budget office right now to be able to determine what needs to be carried forward into the following fiscal year. So I do expect that number to come up, although it might be still below where we were in the prior year.
Because I was thinking that it might have been due to the uncertainty of some of the federal dollars. So I was just curious about that.
It's not yet, so we're still kind of going through to figure out what calls we need to make about what federal funding we may need to pull back from that's currently in the proposed budget. So we're going through that analysis. Once we have a recommendation to give, we'll bring that forward.
Okay, so it may be a little bit lower once you go through that analysis?
Could be.
Yeah. Okay, all right, thank you. Well, thank you so much for all your work, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. Let's go to Councilmember Salas.
I just wanted to second what Councilmember McKay said. Kamei, sorry, I'm struggling for some reason. Matt, you used the term simple roofing jobs, and I just want my colleagues to know, and you to know, that the company I left to take this position does millions of dollars in fees for expert witness work on roofs that leak. Not repairs, but just fees. And I just wanted to build on what Councilmember Kamei said about how important is the work you're doing and how it's so silent when it works, and it seems like that's pretty much working all the time, except perhaps some of the elevators. But other than that, thank you very much for what you guys do, and gals.
Thanks, Councilmember. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. No other questions on the capital budgets? Yes, City Manager McGuire.
I'm actually, our staff is great. Eric was listening to Councilmember Campos' question, and he came running back. So here we go. So would you like to come down, Eric, so we can at least close out that question, and so everybody can hear the answer to, and maybe if you could please repeat it for him when he gets to the podium.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Appreciate you being here. I just had a question looking at the operating budget. I was referencing if you have in print on page 254. There's a metric that we have. It's the housing facilitation effectiveness, and I was curious what it is that metric is trying to tell us, given that right now we're seeing the lowest results that we've had in the past 4 years.
Thank you, Councilmember. So Eric Sullivan, Director of Housing. So in this metrics section of the budget, I'll give some broader context here. As I mentioned earlier, we've taken a lot of changes to revise our metrics across the board as we're working through just realignment of workflow processes throughout the department, and then 2, better understanding how we're shifting from outcomes focused rather than outputs focused, which is what a lot of the metrics in the past had been reoriented to. So when we look at the effectiveness of the housing, what that metric was intended to get at was to better tracking what is the series of investments that we're making across the board. As we look through that metric within the sort of overall framework of all the metrics that we have adjusted, we're trying to get a closer in picture as to what is the impact that we're having across all of our investments, and then within that impact of investments, how we're ensuring that each of those investments are getting to particular outcomes. Okay,
that makes sense. And so, given that the the number is declining, what do we need to do to achieve that goal?
So I would have to circle back with more detail on how we're going to address that on the declining goal. Two factors that go into it are, one is as we're adjusting the utilization of our funds, how are we best mitigating some of the impacts as we're moving funds around to different programs, and then two, as we're looking at metrics, because we changed some of the baseline numbers that goes into the numerators for some of our metrics, that is resulting in maybe some unintended consequences. So allow me to take time to just review that, and I can come back to you in more detail.
Yeah, I'm curious, you know, in the context of this budget, knowing that we're now looking at an operating budget, what opportunities do we still have to, you know, move the needle and make progress in this indicator area?
Well, there's a number of different factors that probably go into that, and how do we move the needle on this indicator? And thinking more broadly, as we look at the outcomes in which we are focused on to get to achieving our goals within the existing kind of council direction that we have. Two, how are we ensuring that the dollars that we are investing are having the most sized impact that we're getting to achieving our outcomes? And then three, as we're looking at how best to measure, ensuring that the numbers going into our equations for getting to the measure are most accurate. And that's why I want to come back to you with more detail related to this metric in order to better contextualize the metric within that overall goals, because we've shifted so many of our metrics in the past year that just the undergrounding foundations have shifted a lot as we're moving away from outputs and more towards outcomes.
And we do have an MBA coming forward on this topic. So we've got MBA for the community indicators for the EOS, TAS, and strategic support CSAs, as well as the housing department's performance measures. So we're updating some of those. And so to the extent that we need to speak to this community indicator, we can try to provide some more information there too.
Yeah, I would greatly appreciate having more information, getting the variety of options that we have within this budget, but also the dollars that we can leverage outside of our budget when the city puts some skin in the game to move the needle on this indicator. I think that it's definitely something that I don't want us to miss, because we want to be making progress on all of our dashboards, and this is a critical one. So thank you for coming down to answer those questions.
Thanks, Councilmember. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so that concludes both the session on our capital budget and our council budget study sessions. Thank you all so much. Thanks to all of our staff. You guys are doing a lot of great work, and we appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. We're adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry. I was not aware of any public comment, but let me confirm. Tony, did you have comment cards?
No, I don't.
Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you.